Hello there, friends. Welcome to the first episode of Louisiana Restaurant Association's Capital Connection podcast. I'm Will DuBos, your host with the Louisiana Restaurant Association. I am the new Director of Government and Public Affairs. Today I'm joined by LRA President and CEO Stan Harris, and together we're going to share legislative session happenings and perhaps a story or two. Stan, no doubt you have stories to tell.
There's no doubt, Will, that there are stories that are abundant at the Capitol of all the things that are funny. You know, when we got together on Sunday to kick off the legislative session with our kickoff dinner, that was the 10th time that we've done that since we've renewed it. It's always funny to listen to the legislators tell their favorite stories of when somebody did something that was crazy and that has become part of the archives of that organization. And it's fun, too, for us to remember that there is no perfect when it comes to making legislation. Sometimes it's not pretty, and as the butchers always said, nobody wants to know how sausage is made, but they certainly like to eat the sausage when it's done. But we'll keep the good ones above board and be able to talk about the things that we're trying to do at the Capitol this session, and also the things that we're trying to do on behalf of the industry to keep our industry moving toward recovery from the impact of COVID.
I thought we'd start this episode off. You brought up the sausage making process. I like to think of it more as boudin, but I think some of us would remember the Schoolhouse Rock cartoon from lower school and just how a bill becomes a law. Would you walk us through that process, Stan?
One of the things that is a challenge for folks is understanding that there's a legally defined process in how a bill becomes a law. You know, Congress overlooks this because they treat rules sometimes like our state Senate does. They just suspend the rules to meet the needs of that particular day or that particular legislator who's trying to get out of town or has something else they need to do that day. But it's a smaller body, 39 senators versus 105 House members. But, you know, I go back and look at 8th grade civics class because realistically, we learn a couple of things in this process. We learn that if it's a spending bill, it has to start in the House of Representatives. If it's a tax bill, it has to start in the House of Representatives. And in our state, every other year is a fiscal session. So that's typically when we're addressing taxes and monetary issues besides the budget. And during the regular session, we have a much broader list of things that can be done, and there's really not a significant limit on the number of bills that a legislator can bring. So when we bring that general session in, like we're going through this year, it's following a special session that had a very limited purpose, and that was about redistricting. Typically, when they have a special session, it's very issue-oriented. It's defined in the call. The governor can call the legislature into session. And for the first time in our history, in the past couple of years, the legislature has called itself into session. Last year, we had one of our first veto override sessions. It wasn't successful in overriding the governor's veto on a couple of controversial bills, but they had it anyway, and I think it was a little squishy on their count. But typically a bill comes up, it's read in on the House floor, the Senate floor, then it's typically assigned to a committee. It comes back from that particular committee. It has a hearing down there. There's robust debate. There can be testimony from the public or interested parties. Sometimes there's no testimony at all. It's just simply maybe a technical correction. It comes back to the floor. It lays over, which means it sits there for a specifically defined period of time. And then they read that bill in again. And then it can come up for floor debate, and then it goes to final passage. If they don't have the votes for final passage, that author may park that bill and may sit there and continue to work the bill. It may work with opponents. It may work with interested parties to try to get it in the right form, to bring it back up for final passage. If a bill fails on final passage, they can make a motion for reconsideration, and they can bring that bill back up again. A bill can be tabled. That means that bill is basically parked, but you have to have a number of votes to be able to recall it from being tabled and bring it back into action. So a lot of parliamentary procedure, a lot of things that are done that you wouldn't normally do in the debate process. And, you know, if you compare it to Congress, Congress used to do a lot of these things. But Congress today, typically they draft a bill, they put it on the floor, and they vote on it. And I think our process is far better because it gives you multiple steps to be able to look at the bill, to debate its merits, and to amend those things out of those bills or add those things to the bill that will make it more functional.
Well, and it's interesting. I think that goes back to the sausage making process. That's where the sausage is made. It's in between the committee hearing. I think one of the more frequent.
On the way to the floor.
Right. Between here and the floor, we'll work it out,
Between
and
the
it's like that is the sausage making process.
It's a place that's unknown, but
Yep.
I've never been to between here and the floor, but I know it exists.
So why is this process important to remember when looking at session and the issues that are coming up during session?
Our members and our industry have gone through a really tough 24 months since COVID's impact began. Going back 2 years ago, we closed our office abruptly, and for 90 days we operated remotely. So that made it very different. Restaurants weren't operating for dine-in service. They were trying to pivot to do takeout, to do delivery, to do curbside. And a lot of restaurants don't have the ability based on their location, if they're more urban, or they're farther out and they're more rural. They just didn't have the ability to do those things. And it was hard because we had some industry workers that were scared to come to work. They were concerned about contracting the virus and those things. And in the early days, if we go back to it, we were worried about every surface and every doorknob and wiping down your cans of corn and beans and peas when you came back from the grocery store. But the media will pick up on hot button issues that come across. Just in the past couple of days, there was an issue about naming the Crescent City connection for former Governor Edwin Edwards. And while you may or may not have an opinion about that, there were some strong opinions about it based on the fact that they had already gone through a naming process. And that's what happens with the media sometimes, is while they pick up on a particular issue, the people that feel very passionate about something, they're going to come out of the woodwork and talk about the history of it. And for us, as something we like to remind the members is, you may have a call from a member of the media that reaches out to you and asks, maybe you're in Monroe, maybe you're in Shreveport, a little further away from Baton Rouge. What do you think about this particular bill? If you have a question about it, you can always reach out to our communications team. They can talk to our advocacy team, and we can get you some answers and really help you fill in the air there and fill in that gap of information. Because it's really important for us as a group to make sure that you're well informed. And if you have an opinion about it, share that opinion. And the other part with this is, too, our action alerts, our legislative alerts that we'll do when we feel like there's something that merits asking our members to reach out to those members of a committee, those members of the floor, that's really important, because when they hear that additional voice, it has absolute impact. We're paid to be their voice at the Capitol. We're paid to get in front of those legislators and know them. It's funny that at our legislative kickoff the other night, our host, Clara Satanovich of Drago's Seafood Restaurant, asked me, how do you know all of these people just by them walking up and their wives' names and all that? I said, well, I wouldn't be too good of a lobbyist if I didn't know who those people were. So that's really part of it, is building that relationship. It's not to mean that we're going to not disagree, because that's going to happen sometimes. But what we have to think about is, we know that you're not a paid lobbyist. We know that you're not focused on these particular details in here, but we can get you up to speed on them so you can have a conversation about it, and we can help you understand better how it might impact your business positively or sometimes favorably.
And just to reiterate, our job is to represent you at the Capitol, but our job is so much, I don't want to say easier, but effective when a legislator can put a face to the issue, especially if you live in that district. And we will return right after this break.
Not just anybody can make the perfect Sazerac. And not just anybody can offer Louisiana's hospitality industry the perfect coverage. For 40 years, everybody who's anybody goes with LRA Workers' Comp.
So Stan, what are some of the bills that have been filed this session that will specifically impact our restaurant industry?
Well, probably the first bill is a proposed change to the tip credit wage that's paid at $2.13. But I believe in order to do that, they'd actually have to establish a state minimum wage. There are also bills that look at statutorily setting a state minimum wage and constitutionally setting a state minimum wage. I'm not a real strong believer that statutory things should be in the Constitution because it makes them very, very hard to change. In our state, we don't have ballot initiatives. So we can't get a group of people together that want to talk about, let's just say, cutting property taxes across the state. The state doesn't assess them, but let's just say we wanted to limit the role of the assessors and sheriffs to assess that. And we wanted to pass a bill to do it. In California, in Colorado, in Florida, you can get the right number of voters and you can put a ballot initiative, and then the people vote on it. In our state, it's a much more refined process. It goes to the legislature in the form of a bill. It's noted that it would be a constitutional amendment. It has a big threshold to be able to get the votes on the floor of the House and the Senate to be able to go forward. And then it needs a favorable vote of the people of Louisiana in order for that to happen. Last year, we had 4 different proposed constitutional amendments. One of them lowered the tax rate on personal income tax and corporate income tax and changed some of the deductions that you had. But at the same time, one of the bills that the business community was pushing and the LRA supported would have given us consolidated collection of sales taxes, and that failed to pass. It's coming back again this year. We're going to support it one more time and see if we can get that passed. The other things that we're seeing right now, there's bills to eliminate the use of plastic bags, which a lot of restaurants use because they're easy to store and they're inexpensive. There's another one on paid family and medical leave. So we're going to see a lot of those in the chance. Typically, as we expand this, we've got about 120 bills on our active track right now. That's probably going to grow to somewhere around 150 or 160. This is a little lower than a typical session. Typical, we're in the 200 to 250 range, but they haven't filed as many bills this session as they would in a regular session. I'm hoping that we don't see a wave of those between now and April the 2nd, but you never know.
Why do you think that is, that they filed fewer bills this year?
I really don't know. I think, they're hitting the rhythm of the fact that the state has an abundance of money from American Rescue Plan money, some CARES Act money, some other infrastructure money that's coming from the federal government that they have a chance to spend. So they're really looking at more positive ways they can do things instead of what we've normally done here, which is, my goodness, where are they going to find the money? And that's been a real challenge. Now, I will tell you, when that 0.45 cents of additional sales tax rolls off in 2025, when it sunsets, it's going to be dire again because we haven't figured out better ways to do this. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the first year of collections under the new income tax, because that won't really be known until 2023 because those tax rates didn't take effect till 2022. So again, it takes a little time to see the results.
Well, that's a breath of fresh air to be dealing with a surplus for a change. But regardless of the amount of bills, I still think it's important to have a robust advocacy team. Wouldn't you agree?
No, there's no doubt about it. Over the last 12 years that I've been here, we've continued to expand our team every couple of years. And right now, in adding your role to the LRA is in a full-time position is really important to us, because we also just elected a new council here in New Orleans that we put a lot of LRA effort behind in getting that team elected so that we can have a stronger voice here in New Orleans. At the same time, we know that this legislature now is about halfway through their term. They're moving toward the third quarter of this particular term. And we'll have some of those people drop out this year like we've had before for open seat races, for judgeships, running for an open mayor's seat, because not all of our elections happen at the same time. That's another nuance in Louisiana, and that Louisiana is known for. But having a strong team also means that we're able to take care of those things. When a member visits the Capitol to testify or to provide information to us, it gives us the ability to host them and get them prepared. Because a lot of people think that this is like being cross-examined. It's not. It's just providing testimony. You're sharing how this affects you. You're sharing with them what you'd like to see happen with it, good or bad. And I think that's part of really sharing that experience, personalizing it, so those members that are sitting up there, they're like you. They're from your community. They're people who are lawyers and insurance people and small business owners and farmers and doctors and veterinarians. So they're doing the same thing, and they know how uncomfortable that is to be on the other side as well.
It's funny, one of the most common questions I get with people, my friends and family who don't really understand what it is that I do, they say, how do you deal with senators and representatives? I said, well, they're just people just like us. They go home, they've got families, they've got jobs, they have things that they care about more than others, and it's just dealing with people.
Yeah, 100%. And we're still dealing with a lot of federal issues. We had a meeting with Senator Kennedy on Monday of this week to talk about getting him behind a restaurant revitalization fund, getting that done so that we could get that knocked out. He didn't commit to it, but he certainly heard enough to make him take a harder look at it. And that's what we have to do sometimes, because we're navigating federal, we're navigating the state with the legislature, we're in season now, and we navigate on the local level in some of our major communities when policy comes up that we think could be adverse or supportive of the industry. That's the other part that you mentioned sometimes. Sometimes there's good bills that come up, there's good ordinances that come up that we want to be able to do that. So we're going to continue to pay attention to it.
Well, Stan, thank you for your time. We appreciate you sharing this refresher on how a bill becomes a law and a glimpse at what's ahead for the LRA advocacy team this session. Until next time, this is Will DuBos signing off for Capital Connections.